My name is Sandeep. Welcome. Good morning. Good morning. Okay. So, how are y'all doing today? Good. Great. Small, intimate setting. I love it. We have a lot, so we can have as many questions as you want. Stop me whenever. Just raise your hand. I will answer your question. If I don't like your question, I'll skip over it. So, today let's talk about Google Cloud Platform and Firebase, creating serverless peanut butter and jelly. So my name again is Sandeep. You can follow me on Twitter at Sandeep Dinesh or whatever. Just search my name. I'm pretty good. Have pretty good SEO, so you'll find all my stuff. So what are we? Who are we? What is Firebase? What is Google Cloud? This is the first talk of the day, so I want to give a quick introduction on what this stuff even is. I'm blocking the screen, so I'll stand here. So Firebase, who's used Firebase before? I see a lot of cool. Who has used Google Cloud before? Okay, a few people. Okay, so quick rundown. So Firebase is kind of Google's mobile backend platform, right? And so if you're building a web app, if you're building a mobile app, we kind of say Firebase is like the set of core tools that you really need to build your app quickly and ship it, and it'll be functioning and cool and stuff like that. So that includes a lot of things like the NoSQL database, authentication, push notifications, analytics, dynamic linking, a lot of cool things that really make building a mobile app backend super easy, right? So you can kind of focus on building your Android or iOS app or your web app, and then don't have to worry about scaling your backend, things like that. And then Google Cloud Platform is basically everything else for your backend, right? So VMs and containers and big data and machine learning and all this stuff. So a little bit more complicated than Firebase, but kind of has the kitchen sink, right? So everything in the kitchen sink. So everything that Firebase doesn't give you, Google Cloud has you covered. And of course, we love to cover our asses, and by asses I mean our passes, fasses, basses, casses, what name you. We love to cover them, and we love working with each other. So Google Cloud and Firebase just integrate seamlessly together, and we have all our asses covered. I'll go through what those are. Now, of course, this talk is called serverless. What in the world is serverless? There's obviously servers somewhere. We don't have magic data centers with like pixies running your code. No, there are servers. Unfortunately, it's been used by marketing departments heavily, and everything is serverless now. I have a lot of strong opinions on what serverless is. And if you want to see what my opinions are, you can just go search for this blog post. Basically, there's fully unmanaged infrastructure. So this is called like virtual machines. And a virtual machine is basically a computer in the cloud where you can install an operating system like Windows or Linux, install your software, and you're in charge of everything. You're in charge of scaling it. You're in charge of operating system updates. You're in charge of what programming language you use, what application you run, what packages are installed, all this kind of stuff, which gives you a lot of flexibility, but of course, with the downside of management, right? Overhead and things like that. Then you have managed services, which you kind of say, I want 5 of these, and it just runs for you, and it takes care of those updates and patches. But you still have to like tell it how much of it you want, right? So you still pay per computer or whatever. And then you have fully serverless, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And this is, you pay for exactly what you use. If you use 10%, you pay for 10%. If you use 10 milliseconds of runtime, you pay for 10 milliseconds of runtime. And it auto scales, and it's fully managed, and you don't have to worry about security updates and things like that. So you just write your code, hit deploy, and you're good to go. So that's kind of that. And we have a lot of different products, and I kind of categorize them into those 3 categories. So you can go check it out. OK, so I work for Google Cloud, as my shirt implies. And I want to start with the bread and butter of serverless, more like the peanut butter of serverless, which is Google Cloud Functions. So Google Cloud Functions, when most people think serverless, they think of functions as a service, so FaaS. And so Google Cloud Functions is our functions as a service. What does that mean? Let's take a look. Basically, right now it supports Node.js. So you write your Node.js code, and you click deploy. And that's it. There's no server management. It just automatically scales depending on how many people call your code. And you only pay for what you use, which is really nice. So you're not overspending. And so when you think about a server, normally you think about an HTTP server. So you write some code, you call a website like www.google.com, and it returns some HTML, right? And so Google Cloud Functions can do that too with the HTTPS trigger. And so basically, we'll give you a fully qualified domain name, and when you hit that domain name, it'll run your code and return that HTML. Really simple stuff. But I think the cool part about functions is the other triggers it can have. So cloud storage is a trigger. So every time you upload an image or a video, you can call a function on that. So maybe you have an image resizing service. So every time a new image is uploaded, it'll resize it to 100 by 100 PNG and then store it somewhere else, right? And you can trigger this every single time an image is uploaded. You don't have to have a server sitting there listening. It's automatically triggered, which is cool. Cloud pub sub, I won't go into too much detail, but basically this is our messaging queue, right? So different applications can write messages and read messages from pub sub, and then a cloud function can be triggered every time a new message comes in. And you can basically chain these together to create big, complicated systems if you want. And finally, stacked over logs, which is like, if something gets logged into our logging system, you can maybe analyze the logs and do things like that. And so this lets you build a lot of things. One really popular thing, of course, is building chatbots on things like Google Home or Alexa, calling the assistant, things like that, because you don't have to have a server there. You say, hey, Google. OK, sorry for everyone on YouTube. I just triggered your devices. Just kidding. You can say, hey, search engine that I like a lot, can you do this? And then once you do that, it'll call your function, and then it'll turn it off, right? So you're not paying for a server that's always running, which is nice. So how do you actually deploy your function? You can do this in multiple ways. The really easy way is to do it directly from the browser on our console UI. Not really recommended because no one likes to code in the web browser. You accidentally refresh the page and all your code is gone, right? Not good. Instead, you can deploy from a command line with this command line, G-Cloud command line SDK. But the way I really like to do it is deploy it from GitHub or Bitbucket. So how many people use GitHub, Bitbucket today? I'm assuming most people, yeah. So basically, this is source control. So you can say, git deploy, sorry, not git deploy, git push. It'll push your code to GitHub. We will detect that your code has been updated, and then we'll redeploy your function, which is really cool. So you can just integrate it straight into your source repositories. And so it's super easy to write something like an HTTP server, right? It's literally 3 lines of code. This is really 1 line of code. I don't know. You can debate on how many lines of code this is. You can put all of JavaScript on 1 giant line. So lines of code is a terrible measurement. But around 3 lines of code, you can have a fully built HTTP server, right? You get HTTPS, fully qualified domain name if you need to use it for things like callbacks on Slack, as full SSL for free, and it's auto-scaling. No matter how much traffic you send at it, we'll just keep scaling it up. So let's do a quick demo of this. Let me just deploy this function right here. So what I'm going to do is go to my Google Cloud dashboard. So this is my project. You can see that Cloud Functions. And so I'm going to click Create a Function. And I'm going to call it Function 1. I'm going to give it some memory. So I can pick 2 gigabytes of memory if it's doing a lot of processing, things like that. But it's not going to do anything, so it'll be hello world. So here you can see our triggers. So pub sub, I'm going to make this a little bigger so people can see. So pub sub, cloud storage, or HTTP. So it's going to be an HTTP trigger. You can see it creates a URL for us automatically. And then we have all these options, right? Zip from cloud storage, or a cloud source repository, or just the inline editor. So here I'm just going to do the inline editor. I can go to my package.json. For all you Node.js people, this is where you put your dependencies in. I don't have any dependencies. Even if I had native things that had to be compiled, like gRPC or like MongoDB, I could just put it here and it'll compile it in the cloud, which is super nice. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I click back. Whoops. Let's do that again. Inline editor, and I'm just going to say, take this off, and instead of saying success, I will say hello Fresno. OK, and so that's basically it. And I will put it into a bucket. Let's do that and create. So the function name here is hello world, and so this function will trigger the hello world function, right? So I'll hit create. Step out of the way. And basically, at this point, it'll deploy the function. So if I had any dependencies, it would build those dependencies. It's actually creating a container under the covers and putting all of this code in there, deploying it onto our infrastructure, and then creating the network paths to trigger your function from that HTTP trigger. So it'll take about 30 seconds. And this is the fun part where we see it spin. We just stare at it. and it's done. So I can go here, it's done, it's deployed. It's a little bit too zoomed in, so I'll zoom out a little bit. And if I go to the trigger, you can see if I click that, it'll say hello Fresno. Awesome. And you can see that there's not really any sort of like cold start kind of thing, because we didn't really have much, so it kind of spins it up really quickly, and it's good to go. Sweet. Let's go back to the slides. Well, hello Fresno, not serverless fans, but that's okay. So there's a few other things that Cloud Functions natively ties into. So logging. If you have this kind of serverless thing, where do your logs go? I don't know. It goes to stack driver logging. So if you use a console log, it'll just stick it into a centralized logging service, right? So you can search it, you can do analytics on it, things like that. Again, I use the Cloud Console mostly, and it's a nice little dashboard. So basically, I can go logs, and I can see my Cloud Function logs right here. So I can say Cloud Functions, and you can see all the logs. And I can go into my, my Cloud Function logs instead of activity, and I'll have nothing except for like, function execution started. So really simple stuff, very easy to debug, but we make it even easier. And we'll take a look at that in a second. So we have things like monitoring, of course. So if you want like invocations, like how many people are using your thing. Let's say you have a memory leak in your thing or some sort of bug, and you're seeing your usage like spike all of a sudden. Well, you can say, hey, I just deployed this new function. Oh my God, it's going crazy. I can roll back, things like that. So you can monitor your actual function. Now here are two really, really cool things, which is tracing and debugging. Now when you have these like little functions calling each other in this distributed system, it becomes hard to know where your bottlenecks are, right? So if you use the Google Cloud Trace library, you just require this at the first line of your code, Google Cloud Trace agent.start, and it'll automatically create these like little waterfall graphs. If you ever tried in Chrome, if you see like the requests and you can see the waterfall, you can do this for your backend code too. So if you have, you're calling out different services, you can see where your bottlenecks and your latency is being created. It's cool, and it's all open source. And then my favorite is debugging, which is the super coolest thing ever. So if you're running these functions, you can't SSH into a machine and get command line access and start stepping through your code as you would locally or with the server. So how do you debug this stuff? With cloud debugging, again, you just put this at the first line of your code, more first than this one, right? That's why it's a little bit ahead. And we'll actually patch into the V8 system that's running, and you can actually dynamically look at the code running on your serverless or serverful app. And you can put in console log statements into your production app without redeploying, right? So if you say, I want to put a console log here, oh man, I gotta like redeploy my whole app. No, you don't. You can just click a button and put a logging statement right there, and it'll run once and give you that console log. Or you can look at the current stack trace and things like that without redeploying, without having to do some sort of crazy stuff to do this kind of debugging. You can just do it live. And there's no impact to your end users, which is really nice. It's basically magic. So what does Cloud Functions look like? Right now, it's using Debian 8 with Node.js 6.1.2, I think, 11.2. It's just been updated or something. What are the latest version of Node 6? That's what we run. So once Node 8 goes LTS, we'll start supporting that as well, which I'm waiting for. It has a bunch of stuff pre-installed, like ImageMagick. You can write data at /temp, so if you need to write some temporary data. Again, it's all serverless. There's no permanent files, so you have to use things that we'll talk about in a second. Native compilation of native modules, and auto-authenticated to other Google services, which we'll take a look at in a second. And of course, you can develop all of this stuff locally as well, which is great. If you're using like VS Code, for example, it'll tie into the native debugger with the emulator that we have. Okay, so that's kind of the peanut butter, right? The protein layer that kind of holds everything together. It's nice and thick and creamy, but it's not sweet enough for me. I need some more sweet. I need some jelly. Where's my jelly? And that's what Firebase really is. It's that sweet, sweet jelly that makes everything amazingly sweet. And the tagline for Firebase is the fastest way to build an app, grow your user base, and earn more money. Basically, it combines a bunch of different Google stuff, like Google AdWords, all the way to the Firebase database, that mobile developers and web developers need to build apps that can, support themselves quickly. All right. So functions function better with Firebase. So we have the same triggers here: Cloud Pub Sub, HTTPS, Stack Driver Logs, and Cloud Storage, including Firebase Cloud Storage, which is like the same thing. But Firebase adds a bunch of other triggers as well. So the most obvious one is the Firebase Real-Time Database, which we'll talk about in a second. But other things is authentication and analytics and hosting. So if someone logs in, you can trigger a function. You can trigger a function on some sort of analytic event and things like that. Again, I'm going to go into very details on what these are in a second. So let's start with building an app. So this app is you're going to take a picture, it's going to do something to that picture, and then send you a push notification, right? And then tell all your friends that you took a picture. Maybe it's something called like Instagram or Snapchat. I know, it's like everyone likes to do this kind of stuff, right? So let's say build the most bare bones version of one of these photo sharing apps with Firebase. So where are you going to store your images? On Google Cloud Storage for Firebase. So this, again, just like Cloud Storage, it's the same thing. You want to store your binary data, right? So images, videos, files, anything that is not going to be put into a database, right? That's not really searchable. So you can do all of this directly from your app. You don't need a server sitting there to like accept your images. You can push directly to Cloud Storage for Firebase. It's all authenticated on the client side, which is really cool. Resumable upload, so if you lose network connectivity, you go through a tunnel, for example, once you get out of the tunnel, it'll start uploading again, right? So you don't have to put all that logic into your own app. We have it covered for you in our SDKs. And you can use all the Google Cloud Storage APIs to access the Firebase data as well, which is nice. So again, they all integrate well together. So let's say in your app, you take a picture, you upload it to storage. Maybe you run a Cloud Function to resize that picture so it's not huge or small and it's all the same size. You get that download URL and you write it to the real-time database. Well, what's the real-time database? The real-time database is the coolest part of Firebase, right? So it's basically what Firebase is known for. And so we have the Firebase real-time database, and we have a brand new database that just came out like 2 weeks ago called Cloud Firestore. And so both of these are giant NoSQL databases that can connect all your devices together, right? So let's say you have 10 people using your app. One person says, hey, what's up? It'll send it to all 10 at the same time, right? It'll synchronize data between all active devices, which is really nice. It's available when your app goes offline. So this means that most servers, when you don't have access, it'll just give you a little Chrome dinosaur and say, you're offline, too bad. But with service workers and Firebase Database or Cloud Firestore, it'll still have an offline cache, so it'll work when it's offline. So if you wanted a really deep dive into what the difference is, go to Chris's talk. But just super fast, basically the real-time database is the original Firebase database. It's a NoSQL JSON store. Simple, quick. I really like it for those simple and quick projects. And Firestore is our next generation combination of Google Cloud Data Store and the Firebase database. So it's a document database, which is a little bit more complicated, a little bit more, like not much, but just a little. But you get a lot more richer querying, a lot more scalability, a lot more capabilities, right? So I would use this database by default. If you don't really know which one is the right choice for you, I'm pretty sure the Firestore will be the right choice for most people. OK, so once it's written into the database, maybe you do a little function to call Firebase Cloud Messaging to send a push notification saying, hey, a new picture is available. OK, what is Firebase Cloud Messaging? Push notifications. All right, next slide. I'm just kidding. Firebase Cloud Messaging is Google's push notification system. So if you are using push notifications on Android today, you're already using Firebase Cloud Messaging. It was called Google Cloud Messaging before. That's what the raw API is called, Google Cloud Messenger or Messaging. Firebase Cloud Messaging is an SDK on top of that. It makes it super easy. So Android, iOS, and web. So if you've ever seen those pop-up notifications in Chrome or Firefox, it's the same push notification platform, which is really cool. Now, if you're a marketing person or a business person and you want to send a email campaign, you can also do push notification campaigns. So you can say, hey, we have a sale, 20% off, and you can send a push notification to all your users or a segmented target of your users with Firebase Analytics. So you can say, everyone in Fresno under the age of 27 who is interested in tech. And then you can target those users of your app and then send them a little push notification. It's cool. And now, the last part about the slides until I can go to the fun demo is Firebase Hosting. And so a lot of people don't know about this, and I think it's the coolest part of Firebase because it's free. Yay, free! And I think a lot of GDs use it because you can put your own domain name, right? So let's say you buy a domain name like mycatisgreat.com. Well, now you have to buy an SSL certificate. You have to like integrate it into your hosting and all this kind of complicated stuff. Firebase, you can just give us your domain name, and we will do all the SSL, CDN, all that kind of stuff for you automatically for free, which is awesome. And new feature is dynamic content with Firebase functions. So typically, you make your HTML and your images and things like that, push it to Firebase Hosting, and then because Firebase Database is all client-side, you can just use JavaScript to access it. But a lot of people said, well, what if I want to run server-side code and do some sort of things like that? Now, Cloud Functions, you can actually trigger a Firebase hosting path. And we'll go through all of this in the demo dynamically, which is really cool. And yeah, all of this stuff, just run Firebase Deploy and you're good to go. That's seriously it. It deploys all of this with one command, right? Demo time. OK, let's do this. So part 0. I have absolutely nothing in here except from this that just says what my project name is. That's it, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is run. Can everyone see this, or is it too small? I'm going to make it a little bigger. OK, I think that's plenty big. OK, clear. So I'm going to say Firebase init. And so Firebase init is the Firebase initialization. Oh my God, that is too big. I'm sorry, you guys had to squint a little bit. I know it's going to be a little hard. That's OK. So I want to deploy all three, database, functions, and hosting. So I'm going to select all three of them and hit Enter. And so it automatically found that Firebase RC that had my project name, so that's good to go. And now it's going to ask me a few questions. I'm just going to answer yes to all of them. So it's going to install some Firebase function dependencies with npm. Public directory, good to go. All right, awesome. So here we basically have scaffolded our project with some files. And I can say Firebase deploy. And I'm only going to deploy hosting just to speed things up. And this is where I test that everything's working. And it looks like it is. So here I can go to this website, and it's my project name.firebaseapp.com. And if I check it out, it'll basically say, welcome, everything is set up, we're good to go. Awesome. So that's it. That's how you deploy hosting. OK, so let's do something interesting now. Let's do the most normal Firebase demo in the world, which is chat. This is the demo that everyone who uses Firebase does because it's so easy to show and it's so fun to play with. So the first thing I have to do is get this initialization thing. That's really easy. I can go to my Firebase project, go to Overview, click Add to my web app, and it'll generate that for me. I can just copy paste it in. So that's pretty easy to do. So it'll give me this little script. Of course, we need to include the Firebase SDK, which is right here. And then I'm going to write real-time chat in literally 10 lines. So one, I create this reference to our Firebase database. So it'll hook into this chat room or branch. And then every time I click the send button, I will basically push the text from the text box into the Firebase database. And then every time a message is added from anywhere in the world, I will create a new div and then add the text from that new element and then append it to the screen. And so you might notice that I really don't have much variables here. That's because this is a bad trick is by default, because IE did this way back in the day and we have to have compatibility going forward. If you have something with an ID in your DOM, like messages or text, it becomes a global variable that you can just use, which is kind of silly. So send just becomes send. So you don't have to define anything. That's like a hack.
I've been using that for a long time.
It's a hack. It's a hack. You're not supposed to do it. Chris says you're supposed to do it. It works great. Just be careful. Because
I use it mostly for DevTools.
Yes. Exactly. but it makes your code look very small. Anyway, let's see how this looks, right? So again, this is just static HTML. There's no functions or anything, so I can go here, and I can say, again, Firebase Deploy, only hosting. Oh, well, that's going to be fun. All right, let's do that. My terminal, part 1. Cool. All right, let's do here. Let's do part 1. Okay. Let's do this again. It might say you're already deploying stuff. Nope, we're good. Okay, sweet. So now if I refresh this page, did I delete the page? I deleted the page. Whoops. Let's go back. I got too excited. Okay, so again, go back here. And you can see that it updated to the new page. And so if you have a device of any sort, you can actually visit, if you can read that, which I highly doubt. And you can, and let's see. You can see that it's not working. And why is that? It's because we have something called database rules. And so if you look into our database, again, so we can use a real-time database or Firestore. In the rules, oh, people are already pushing. I have these, which basically say that you can do a bunch of stuff. So I don't want any rules. Rules are for silly people. So let's do true, and publish that. Oh, this is, okay. And now if I refresh, you can see that they're all coming in. Hey, folks. Oh, hi. Of course, enter doesn't work because I didn't code it. You want to type something, Chris? And you can see it coming in. And so if Chris types something and hits send, he's typing in something long. Oh, man. All right. And so you can see that that's all I needed to have like real-time communication between our multiple browsers. But that's really cool. But if I hit refresh, you can see that's that really weird flashing thing. And so if you kind of think of why it's doing that, it's loading basically this file, right? And so this file doesn't have any of that data in it. And so what it has to do is once it's loaded, then it connects to the database, gets all the data, and then displays it on the screen. So this means that we have this kind of really weird thing that it's okay, it's really quick, but it can be better, right? What if we can just load the page and everything just shows up as is? So this is where Firebase is, oh my God. We might all have to evacuate, I'm just kidding. So this is really where Firebase's dynamic hosting comes into play. So it can use Cloud Functions to dynamically generate this HTML before we hit the page. So let's take a look at how that works. So in this case, I'm going to have a function, and I'm going to have my, and you can see that I removed the index.html completely. Right? So in part 1, we had that index.html, and now I don't have it. Instead, I have a function and index.hps. So HPS is a handlebars view engine. It's basically, it looks just like HTML, but I can do things like this. So I can put a little each, and so for each message, just make a div with the text, right? And so I can render this, and I can pass it a set of messages, and it'll basically render those out, and then create the HTML. Again, everything else looks very similar, except one thing, I'm just doing this limit to last one, which is going to, instead of getting all the messages again, it'll start getting the new messages, which is nice. Okay. Now, in my Firebase function, what I'm going to do is basically require a bunch of libraries. So Firebase functions, Firebase admin, which is required to connect to Firebase. And then I'm going to use consolidate, which is our views engine, which gives us handlebars, and express, which is a Node.js web server. Okay. So again, I connect to our Firebase database. And this time, because I'm running on the server side, I can just do this Firebase config Firebase instead of copy pasting that giant set of values. And then it looks very, very similar. I connect to that same chat ref. And this time, what I'll do is I will listen to slash, right? So any URL that comes to this web server. And then I will connect to our Firebase database, get the values once, right? So instead of doing it on child added, which will every single time, it'll just do it once. It'll get all the messages from the database and then render that handlebars template with those messages. And then I export that as this function. So I'm going to export the whole app, which is our Express app. Now the last thing I have to do is basically tell Firebase to trigger this function when I go to index.html. And so to do that, I go to our firebase.json. And in our hosting section, I can do something called rewrites. And so I can rewrite anything, any path to a function that I want. So I'm just going to say everything goes to our index function. And so the index function, of course, is this function right there, index. Okay? So every time I go to any website on slash, on like the root directory, it'll go to this index function. Otherwise, it'll go to 404, which is just 404. OK, well, let's deploy this. So Firebase Deploy. And this time I'm not going to do only hosting because we have functions. I want to deploy the whole thing. And so this will take a little bit longer because unlike just putting a static file, it has to actually compile that function that we saw before. So it's going to upload our function code, compile it, do all kind of stuff. And if we go back to our dashboard, ooh, people put emoji in there. Nice. So we can go to our functions section. And you can see that we already have our function 1 that we created before, right, from the console. And you can see that it created our index function. Let me just check if that's already done. Nope, still doing. So it takes about 30 seconds, like I saw before. And let's see. Let's just wait for it. OK, so it's done. So at this point, if I hit refresh, you can see that it's not flashing, right? It's actually preloading this data in. And just because, I'm going to make it a little smaller. And so if I type something in new, hello, of course, it'll still work. And if Chris types something, oh no. I know. Chris, I need you for my demo. It still works, right? ADDF, perfect. And if I hit refresh, again, it doesn't flash, which is awesome. So now we have server-side rendering. This is what that's called. And so typically, you'd use Angular or React or something like that. And it has all this stuff built in with server-side rendering. I did it manually. Everything works fine. Firebase works great with these React and things like that, which is awesome. A lot of fire emojis. I like it. Cool. Now, let's do something different. Let's do some Google Cloud stuff. So we use Google Cloud Functions to power the back end. But now let's do some machine learning. Ooh, machine learning. Yeah. So most people, when they do machine learning, they use vision or speech or text analysis, things like that. And we have APIs to do all of this with a simple REST API call. But then I said, that's boring. We always talk about that. Let's do something even more boring. Let's do the most enterprise boringest thing that I could find on Google Cloud Platform, which is the DLP API, data loss prevention. This is designed for big companies when they have a system and people start sending them phone numbers and social security numbers. They don't want that to be leaked out, right? And so we have the same problem at Google when people talk to our support engineers or people just send social security numbers on Gmail, which you really shouldn't do, right? It's not good. People will get your social security number. But the problem is we have to analyze how Gmail is working and work on bugs and things like that. So if a social security number leaks into our logging system, all of a sudden we have your personal information, which is bad. So before we send it to our logs, we want to kind of scrub it out, right? Clean it up, make sure that it's, there's no personal identifying information that we can use, that our engineers can tie back to you, right? We don't want to have your name and your social security. That's bad. So we have this API that uses machine learning to kind of strip all that stuff out, which is really cool. And so what I can do is, again, this looks exactly the same, except we're going to make two chat branches, chat and chat clean. And so chat is basically the raw, unfederated chat. So you can send anything you want there. And then chat clean is our cleaned up messages. And so what I want to be able to do is write to chat, but read from chat clean, right? So only the admin can read from chat, and then only the admin can write to chat clean. OK, So what we're going to do in our function is a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to use the Google Cloud DLP API. Again, it's just a NPM package that I can just install. And what I'm going to do, again, this looks exactly the same, except we're going to talk to chat clean. And what I'm going to do here is every time I get a new chat message, so you can see I'm going functions database on create. So every time there's a new chat message, I'm going to take that message, and then I'm going to call the DLP API. And every time it's at least possible that this is a privately identifiable information, we have different levels of likelihood that you can specify. Then I'm going to take it and replace it with whatever it is, right? So if it's a phone number, it'll say United States phone number. And so that's what this replace between function is going to do. And then this is the promise train. And it's going to inspect that content, right, using this request. And then if there is any of that stuff, it's going to replace a bunch of stuff. This will make a lot of sense once you see it running. And then it'll console log a few things so we can see it in our logging. And then finally, it'll push it back into the database. So this will push it back into Firebase, right? So it's actually not returning it to the end user. It's going to push it back into Firebase. And then Firebase will send it to all the devices. So let's deploy the last part. Part 3. Boom. So this time it's going to have two functions. One function is our index, which will render our server-side rendering, right? So there's no flashing. And the second function is the database trigger. It will listen to the database and clean up our data. And so the last thing I want to show is the rules. So if I go back to our rules are good now. Yeah. So this is the rules before. Again, read true, write true. This means anyone can read and write from database, which is really, really unsafe. And so what we're going to do is a little bit better. Still unsafe, but that's OK. And so let's wait for this to deploy, and then the rules will show up. Oh no. Rules. Let's see. Let's give it a second to do that. I think rules might be last. Look at my rules. So in our rules, we have this. Let me just make sure it deploys. And so maybe I'm just going to copy paste just to make sure that it goes in. It should deploy it, but I am not going to take any chances. OK, so go to functions. You can see that now we have 3 functions. Index, make clean, which is our database reference. So you can see that it's a different trigger, different event. And if we go back to our database, let's check it. Point. OK, looks good, looks good. Looks like it's all done. And now comes the fun part. So what I'm going to do, just to make everything clean, is just delete all these chats. And then refresh the page. I know, right? All the emojis are gone. Oh, well. So now if I say hello, and I hit send, you can see it takes a little bit longer to code through. That's because it has to go through that, different APIs, different functions, go to different databases. So it's going a little bit slower because it has to do the check, right? Hello, this is bot. Let's say that. Again, a little bit slower, but still pretty fast, right? Now, second time's a little faster because it warms up, right? OK, wait. Stop, guys. Hold on. Let me try this. So if I say hi, my phone number is 510-770-1430. It's not my phone number anymore. Well, it doesn't care. Yeah, but it'll redact it automatically, right? That actually might be that. So basically, it'll give you a bunch of different ones. And so if you look at our logging, we can see all the different things. My code is really naive. It just picks the first thing that gives us. So if I say something like this, did someone actually type in the social security? I really hope not. And so you can see this is not considered a phone number, right? And so you have to be a little bit careful, obviously, because it's machine learning and it's not perfect.
Why not? Because of the spaces?
Yep, exactly. So it's using a lot of different ways to think about it. If I just typed in like this, for example, it just thinks it's a random string of digits, right? It's actually looking for things like phone number and other keywords around it. It's using more machine learning to do it. And it sometimes, again, I'm using the most probable, so there's more and less likelihoods that you can do, like less unlikely or extremely likely and things like that. So we can look at the logs and actually look at what stuff is going in. So if you look at this, you can see that this likelihood is very likely. And so that's pretty much obvious. Right? Again, I'm just doing silly things, just looking at a single little metric. But I can go through and look at this. And it says phone number is very likely, but the previous one, let's look at, can't find it. Where is the log for it? Here, OK. So in this one, it said, where is it? Can't find the log. It didn't find anything. So severities, info, things like that. So anyway, I don't know what I'm looking at. It's too many logs. You can use the search, which is much easier. But anyway, that's pretty cool. So basically, we went from real-time chat using just client-side code, static HTML hosted on cloud, Firebase Hosting. And then we made it go server-side rendering with Firebase functions, tying it straight into our Firebase Hosting. And then we called API on the back end using the admin SDK and Google Cloud Machine Learning. So this is, again, kind of a silly thing to make. No one's going to use this project in real life. But you can take these same pieces and create really complicated, really cool things. Maybe Chris will talk about something cooler. Is he doing chat too? Maybe. It's the easiest thing to demo, which is why we like to do it. Never do this in real life, even though it's not real. And that's basically it. If you have any questions, I'm here. Yes, Rio.
Yeah, so I've been wondering something that I probably could figure out, but since you're here, I'm going to take it.
Of course, yeah.
Hey, Firebase Deploy, does it do any minification or any other build process?
Nope.
I don't think it does.
It does not.
I'm getting stuff, because by the way, hosting is awesomely fast for
Mm-hmm.
anybody, and the whole HTTP thing is awesome. HTTPS, let's get that in there. So I was just curious because I was looking at some of the speed tests out of the mobile speed test.
Yeah.
It was saying it wasn't minified. I'm like, okay,
correct.
so I still need to run my build process.
Yeah, so if you use something like Babel or Webpack or whatever, yeah, run it before. We just we don't want to touch your code and mess with it.
Okay.
Now, if you want to go really fast, David East has these like performance on Firebase Hosting like videos. And because we give you a free CDN, you can set things like cache headers, and it'll cache it all over the world automatically for free, right?
Oh,
and so, like, let's say you have users all over the world. It was like, the first time they hit it, it'll be cached, and then it'll be super fast for that locality, which is really cool.
Can you tell me that? What was the name of that?
Cache headers.
Yeah.
Oh, David East.
David East.
Yeah. He does what does he do?
Ask Firebase?
The guy who does Ask Firebase?
Yeah. What's it called? Firesides? No, I don't know what they're called.
Fireside chat.
Things like that.
Anyway,
he does stuff.
Yeah, I want other people to ask.
But yeah, that is a very good question. Yeah, so Firebase Deploy won't do anything. We had to do it before and give it to it. It's not going to touch your code. Yeah.
How is DLP?
DLP. Yeah.
But when you configure it, where did you tell that it should do this privacy?
Oh, yeah. So I did that
What's the machine?
in my
Firecast.
Firecast. That's what it's called. So right here, I basically have this Firebase database trigger. And so every time there's a new chat message, I'm going to call the DLP API here. And it's going to do all this stuff and then return it back to the database.
So DLP is only for privacy related stuff?
Yeah, it's for privacy related stuff. So it can go DLP. So basically, you can check it out here. It's for larger organizations or anyone dealing with PII that needs to be able to redact information, right? And it's a good first step. Again, if you do what I did, which is really like basic and kind of rudimentary, it's not going to work too well. But you can throw this into your workflow, and it'll redact a bunch of information automatically, which is awesome. Yeah. And it can do a lot more than I said. If you take a picture of a license, like your driver's license, it'll actually like block out your name and stuff, or like your passport and things like that. So
You would be crazy enough to put your driver's license up there, but thank God there's something to make them.
I mean, how many people ask you for your driver's license and ask you to fax it over or something like that, right? Everyone does it. And so this will actually, there's a cool demo from Google Cloud Next where we say, there's like canonical fake credit cards and fake driver's licenses, and someone puts it up there, and then it's like, it just puts like red bars over the private information, which is really cool. Like,
So Google Hangouts is encrypted end-to-end, right now?
Google, I don't, no idea, no
I
idea.
thought it was recently. Anyway, I'm sorry, Hoffman had it.
On the Needle Talk REST API, is there a way to say, filter, for example, when I did the SSN, I just wrote SN, and it detected it as phone number instead of closest.
So we can look at what it, so you said SN?
Yes.
Put your actual social security number on
This one, right? Okay, so it basically said social security number possible, phone number possible. So it gave you both, and then my code just looks at the last thing.
Oh, okay.
My code is terrible. Yeah. So you have, it gives you a JSON of everything back, and again, you can like say like only look for social security numbers. For example, if you're not worried about phone numbers and you only worry about social security, you can say only filter for that. I just said everything, and I'm just like naively looking at the last element and just throwing it back.
All right.
Yeah.
I was like, that's kind of weird why I said phone number.
Yeah. So again, the actual, that's why I logged it, so you can actually see. And you can see that it does both, but yeah. Again, machine learning is not foolproof either, right? So you gotta be a little careful all the time. Yeah.
In the debugger for the function,
Mm-hmm.
you dynamically added the logging.
Yeah.
Can you add anything in there, or is it?
Can I demo that? Let me, so if I go debug, I'm not sure if I have anything set up for debugging, but we can see. I don't.
I was wondering if it was limited, or you can make any code changes you want.
No, you can't make any code changes you want.
Okay.
Definitely not. So there's two things, a snapshot and log point. So snapshot, what it'll do, let's say you have a function and you put a snapshot over there. So if you ever had a break statement in a debugger, you know how to like stop your code execution and then you can see your stack. It's similar, but it won't stop execution. Instead, it'll take a snapshot of your current scope and then put all the variables in the sidebar so you can like look at what the variables are. And then log point, you can put console logs wherever you want. But you can't change that, that would be crazy, but awesome. Maybe in the future.
So you can't debug the cloud functions locally?
You can.
Oh, okay.
So we have something called functions, which is a, I forgot, I have GSH which messed up. So there's a local emulator, yeah, and I can show you that real fast. So
Emulator, okay.
Google Cloud Functions Emulator.
Feed into Chris's time.
Yeah. Oh, we're going through, yeah, let's go through.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're good. Again, if there are any questions, we can talk later and stuff like that. Yeah, Cloud Functions Emulator, it's all open source, just runs on local machine.
Does that no remote debugger?
It does. That's what I just showed before. So the remote debugger is this thing right here. So you can put in your source code and you can do remote debugging as well. Yep.
Cindy, you're going to be around all day, most of the day?
Yep.
Most of the day?
Yep.
So if anybody